Good evening, everyone, and thank you for good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining me tonight. It's an honor to serve with you guys as your representative of Georgia's 7th Congressional District. I really am appreciative of you guys being here and partaking in something I believe will be instrumental in communicating ideas, answering questions. Unlike an in-person, which I plan on having, I've already seen questions coming across on when's your next in-person. We'll do that. But realize that we have much more access when you have over 10,000 people, maybe 15,000 people on a call, than when you have maybe 500 to 1,000 people and people are frustrated and yelling, and it's hard to communicate. So I'm happy to do both, but I'm really happy you're here tonight. If you want to participate, please press *3 to ask a question, and then press *6 to subscribe to my weekly newsletter where we can tell you kind of what's going on a regular basis. We're going to give people time to dial in, and so I'm going to give you a little bit of background drop first while everybody's signing in. Most of you realize I was a Marine first. That's kind of how I identify, that's how I approach things, mission accomplishment, serving this great nation. Hopefully that comes across in my attitude. We've been very successful in legislation passed in our constituent services, which I'm very proud of, top quintile in both volume and in results. Very excited about that. We never ask if you're a Democrat or Republican. We just get the job done. As many of you realize, I've also been an ER physician in our community for many years, served overseas as well, done a lot of traveling around the world. So I feel like I have a pretty good grip on some of the biggest spending items in government, whether it be healthcare, which is the biggest spending item. And it's also probably the biggest spending item for a lot of you in families. The average amount of money you spend on healthcare in a year for a family of 4 is $30,000. That's not necessarily counting your deductible or your copay. That's just hamstringing. That's impossible to sustain, where you're basically putting a brand new car worth of money into something you may not even use per year. That needs to change. We have a big accountability problem. We are being run roughshod over by special interest in the pharmaceutical, big insurance, a hospital system. They get a lot of problems to fix. And not everybody's a villain, but we do have some accountability problems that we're going to address hopefully in this year. I think it's really important that you guys realize that when we come at this, that's the biggest spending item for us. That's probably the biggest spending item for you. It's also the second biggest spending item for businesses, and it's also the second biggest inflationary cost to Americans. The first of which is education. Notice the two things that the government has gotten in the middle of, which is education and healthcare, have become instantly unaffordable. We are not the solution, my friends. We're a lot of times the problem. The Affordable Care Act, I won't vilify its intentions, but since its inception, and it's basically consolidated medicine, 50%, half of all doctors that used to practice independently now practice under either a hospital system or some other owned entity that was not them. That's increased, just by itself, has increased the price point by about 30%. So when you force doctors, when you're not getting paid as much as the hospital system, when you're not having site neutral payments, when you're not allowing doctors to practice independently without huge disadvantages, they have to pay taxes. They're competing against not-for-profit, more expensive entities. That's not fair, and that's not good for you as a consumer. When you look at insurance companies making 230% more in net profits than they did before the Affordable Care Act, that's another big part. And so even when we do the supplemental spending on Medicaid, which we've been doing all along since the COVID era, it didn't stem any of your premiums. Matter of fact, the extension of those supplements only affects 7% of the American population, and only by a small percentage compared to what their overall increase is going to be anyways. So we need to get better. We need to be more competitive. And if you want to see how government versus out-of-pocket payments work, look no further than LASIK eye surgery, where it's not insured. It's not covered by insurance. And in 40 years, the price point has not gone up at all because it's become more competitive and you have a better product. But if it was covered by insurance, you bet it would be at least triple the cost. Because once again, you get government involved, you get regulation called, and they'll always have a price point increase. So once again, getting the government out of the way of your success is really important to me. I think education, healthcare, and debt are our three biggest challenges. But if most of you will look at our affordability piece, that goes right along the cost of those things. consumables are only a small part of that. Energy is only a small part of that. And I think we're doing good in that. Where actually inflation is much, much less than it used to be. It's around 2%, which hasn't been in a long time. The price of earnings is going up faster than inflation, which is always a good sign. We have fewer government jobs, but more overall jobs, and that's a good trend in the right direction. Once again, because you don't have to pay for the private sector. You have to pay for every government job. So when we're trying to identify what is success in the future and what increases your income, what makes life more affordable, those are all things we're going to address, as well as the future of the dollar and its value worldwide. I think we've probably delayed the questions far enough now. Again, if you want to participate, feel free to press *3 to ask a question, and press *6 to subscribe to my newsletter. And I look forward to having a great engagement tonight. And with that, I open it up to questions.
Great. Tonight, our first question will be with Peter. Peter, you are live with the Congressman.
Thank you, Congressman. This is Peter, and I'm actually a licensed broker, and I've noticed that helping hundreds of these folks, these families in Georgia, they originally said that the rates were going to go up between 20 and 40%, but they ended up going up 300 to 500%, and wondering how in the world they got authorization to do that. And then I wanted to find out why, or what is Congress doing on both sides of the aisle to actually lower these premiums aside from the subsidies?
Yeah, that's a great question. And realize the subsidies, once again, don't affect the great majority of insurance holders. 93% of people don't get any subsidies with that extension. And the people who do get the subsidies, it's really an incomplete subsidy, so their premiums are still going to go up. One of the major problems is the regulatory burden and lack of competitiveness, lack of transparency. Where's the money going? When you have 4 of the top 10 Fortune 10 companies in America are either big pharma or big insurance, 7 of the top 20 making record profits, and then saying we need to still increase our premiums even though we're making record profits, and the stock is going crazy, that's a problem. Now, that has a lot to do with the way we've regulated, the way we've not allowed them to be accountable. The fact that they have hundreds of thousands of false policies, which we pay them by the government, that they don't have to pay back because they've gotten away with it. The fact that they deny a third of all claims, and they get away with it. We need great accountability. I think that's going to come down to the Secretary of Health and Human Services, CMS, and making sure that we collaborate to hold these companies accountable, that we don't allow their lobbying efforts in Congress to keep us from changing the laws to make this a more competitive environment between interstate insurance that we allow. I think a big thing that we don't have as part of the President's plan, but we're going to get incorporated, is an associative health plan where you can take a bunch of small businesses, group together, and have the same leverage as any big business in negotiating your prices, that you have pricing transparency. Because we've had that in the past where we said, hey, we're going to be able to look and see what you're spending your money on, or how much things cost out of pocket versus insurance premiums or insurance costs. And you know what hospitals have actually done? They've taken the hit. I'll take $1 million fine. And the insurance company, I'll take $1 million fine because I'd rather you not see what's in my books. And we don't follow up and just fine them and fine them and fine them and over again to actually make the laws work. They can actually afford to hide against the law what they should be transparent with. And that's why we can't get to the bottom of this. But we're all over it. And I think there's enough people that understand what's at stake, understand that even though doctors, we thought doctors were the problem. Doctors make too much. Well, they make 30% less since the Affordable Care Act. Obviously, that didn't affect your premiums going up by almost 100%. So where is the problem? We know where the problem is. We know where the money's been hidden. We know who's making the money. Now we just need to tackle the biggest lobbying group in America.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter, for your question. Moving on to some online questions. We have Ken. He is curious when your next in-person town hall will be.
Okay, as the first question that came in, I was chuckling because we literally just talked about that right before I saw that question online. It'll be in May. It'll be somewhere in the central geographic center of my district. I'm excited about it. You know, everybody knows we had a very famous town hall last time. We'll put some guardrails on that because I think it becomes less useful if people are grandstanding and won't even allow an answer to a question. I don't want this to be about grandstanding. I don't want this to be about TV cameras. I want this to be about a good dialogue. I don't think when I have town halls, I try to not keep it partisan. I don't consider myself a partisan when we're talking town halls. That's a nonpartisan address to the people, my constituents that have real problems that it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. I want to be able to answer the questions, but I want to be able to answer the question without people booing and heckling and actually having a factual conversation. That's really important. So we put some guardrails on it. We make sure that it's useful rather than just a show.
Great. And then another question from Ken from online is, what is your plan for healthcare?
Well, I don't always get to have my way, unfortunately. The president's plan is probably the one that's going to be added to by the Doctors Caucus and by Congress. We're going to negotiate basically where we have pricing transparency. We can have a catastrophic plan. So right now, because the Affordable Care Act basically was designed so that people wouldn't have catastrophic plans where you pay out of pocket for everything other than when really bad things happen, like you do with your car insurance. Like you don't use your car insurance to change your car oil or to change a blinker or a light that goes out. If you did, it would be unaffordable car insurance because there'd be an administrative cost for everything. You'd be arguing about everything. It'd be just the way that our health insurance is. If you pay out of pocket for health insurance, or for your health care cost, it is a fraction of what the insurance company charges you and then upcharges to the hospital. And the hospital constantly argues. When I was in the ER, right before I got elected, we had several within the last 2 years of my time in the ER, I think 3 insurance companies basically would not do business with the hospital. We had to send them to different hospitals that did because they negotiate the price point to an unaffordable point with each hospital, and it just increased the cost once again overall. So my health insurance plan would basically make it less difficult to compete between states, make it easier for people to associate with each other, small businesses, make sure that you could use it for catastrophic insurance so that if you have, for the average price of a physician call would be out of pocket, but it would be cash value, the cheapest way to pay for anything. And so that more private practitioners could actually be competing with the hospitals that are not-for-profit that have 30% increased costs to their doing business. So you can actually have the price point brought down. Because right now, you have about 20% of practitioners that still practice independently, but they do it at a price cost that's much more affordable to you. I want to make sure that you're able to pay out of pocket for things that make sense and then use the rest for the catastrophic insurance. Once again, it's kind of like when you have a $500 deductible versus a $1,000 deductible versus a no deductible for your car insurance. There's a drastic difference in your premiums because they know if you're paying out of pocket for the small things and you're just using it for catastrophic, it's much, much more affordable. And most people will benefit from that. You'll just have a much better price point and you won't be spending all your money on a premium that you may or may not ever use. I think those are some starting points. There's a lot more to the minutia and keeping these health insurance companies accountable, making sure they don't accept false claims, that they don't deny claims, that they don't upcharge or deny you pre-authorized care for big things. Those are all things that upset all of us and really make the insurance industry difficult to deal with.
Great. Thank you so much. And if you're just joining us, please be sure to press *3 to ask a question or *6 to subscribe to our newsletter. Next, we'll be going to James from Johns Creek. James, you are live with the Congressman.
Hey, how you doing today? So real quick here, I like what you're talking about catastrophic care and how you approach it. But I guess one of the 2 key points I want to understand is how can we make HSAs ubiquitous so that that's part of everybody's portfolio, and how can we expedite interstate purchases so we can always shop for the best price in the country?
Yeah, so those are 2 points that I was trying to make in the last. I didn't mention the HSA portion, which is often confused, but the interstate portion is First Start, right, where you make it easy to buy insurance wherever you want to. The insurance companies hate that because it increases competition, drives price points down. Second part is HSA. Now, HSA, for people who don't realize, a health savings account, basically, you can fund it in multiple different ways, and businesses can recruit for people they're trying to employ by how good their insurance policies are. What I think ultimately would be kind of like what the Singapore model is, where a lot of times they have a business pay half, you pay half on the buy-in for let's say the health savings account was $5,000 for a year. If you don't use it that year, whatever you don't use rolls over to the next year. So you don't have to reinvest. So if you're a judicious consumer of that HSA and you say, well, I'm going to pay out of pocket for that prescription rather than using the insurance company, then you actually get the which you shop around. You could use GoodRx or TrumpRx, whatever you want to use. Find the best price, and sometimes it actually could cost almost nothing, less than your copay would be. And especially if you're going to do a big deductible or whatever like that, it comes directly out of your health savings account, which would be basically tax deductible or tax deferred or tax sheltered. And basically, you're not paying tax on that money that you're going to use for healthcare, and it rolls over to the next year. So whatever you're judicious with and you can save, you don't have to replenish the next year, half of which from the business, half from you. So once again, you have skin in the game for saving that money. I think it once again makes the consumer drive the price point. Because right now what happens is if I write a prescription to you, with most people's insurance companies performing the way they do, you'll take that prescription, go down to any pharmacy because you don't even know the difference. You give it to the pharmacy. They then charge you that copay, which let's say it's $10. Then I'm going to make these are arbitrary numbers, but let's say you fill that prescription for an antibiotic for $90 is charged to the insurance company. Then they take the average of all insurance claims they have, and they upcharge that by 10% to make their profit. Well, okay, so now that was $100 that they basically made off of that one prescription, because $90 that the pharmacy charged them, which they reimburse, then they get to upcharge you by 10%, which is $100, plus your $10 copay. Your premium basically went up by $110. You could have paid $10 out of your pocket for the same exact medication from your HSA before taxes. Wouldn't that be great? So literally you're saving over $100 on just that one purchase of what should have been just $10. So just to give you an idea of the kind of things that the power of an HSA, and once again, the power of going across state lines and making it easier for insurance companies to participate in healthcare plans. Once again, the more competition, the better the prices. That's just universal to anybody learned that in junior achievement.
Great. Thank you so much. Our next question will be from John in Cumming. John, you are live with the Congressman.
Thanks, Congressman. My name is John, and I'm a combat veteran who utilizes the Atlanta VA hospital. I understand that hospital falls outside of your congressional district, but just wondering if you had any influence over the state of that facility. And I don't know if you visited there recently. I've used VA hospitals throughout the country, and as a disabled veteran, I have to say, that hospital is in absolute disarray. There's certain units of that building that are falling apart. It feels like a not safe place for me to go get treatment. Is that something on your radar or something you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I've been there 3 times, met with leadership all 3 times, and then on top of that, went to lunch with the new administrator after I'd like to say I had some small part in helping the old administrator go her separate way because I thought she was horrible. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's true. I thought it was, I couldn't agree with you more. It was poorly run. Most people don't realize that most VAs are fairly autonomous. So that's why you have some VAs they love and some VAs we hate. It's like a church. If you don't, each church can be in the same denomination, but they can be drastically different in personality and leadership, which affects the whole demeanor of that facility. I was skeptical of the new administrator, to be honest. I mean, he's going to hate to hear that. But when he came on board and I listened to him and his leadership style, I'm really impressed. He has the service-oriented idea. He's taking a lot of feedback. He's trying to do a lot of things. He's got the right people in there to make the improvements. They recently announced a major funding for infrastructure improvements at the Atlanta VA specifically. Obviously, they closed down the aged and contaminated old age facilities. It was just horrible. It was just, there's no way you could have redone that. I mean, once you get ants in there and stuff like that, it was just something they couldn't do. I think what's going to happen in the future, and if I had my way, this is something we do, is you take a look at the VAs that are underperforming significantly over time, or the ones that don't serve a large population. So like there was one in South Dakota where the VA there actually had way more administrators than they ever had patients in a typical month. And the price point just made no sense. Why not just send people out to TRICARE for life, reimburse them that way, get rid of the hospital structure, the VA, the administrators, the doctors that weren't doing anything, that couldn't even do procedures. If it was complicated, you're going to send them out anyway because you don't have proficient surgeons. I think we need to kind of took almost like a BRAC, and I know people are freaking out as soon as I say that, but base realignment and closure of facilities that we don't use in the VA to the price point. We did this with military bases. We did it with military active duty hospitals. A couple hospitals actually expanded. I was at Camp Lejeune. It was one of the few I think one of two that expanded. Most of them either went away or shrunk or stayed the same. We need to do the same thing with VA, though. Quite frankly, if it's not giving us the price, the return on investment, we get rid of it. And we put it out in the civilian population, spend the same or less money for a better result. And so I agree with you. The VA in Atlanta doesn't continue to improve and get better and service at a price point that makes sense to us. Let's get rid of it. I'm all for it.
Great. Thank you so much. Our next caller will be Deborah from Alpharetta. Deborah, you are live with the Congressman.
Hi, Congressman. Thank you for being here tonight and letting us ask you questions. Thank you for being our rep. My question is, I feel the SAVE Act needs to be passed. It's very, very important. How are we going to get it passed?
Great question. We literally talked about that the first few minutes we got back into conference. First of all, it's not just the SAVE Act now. It's the Save America Act. It's in the House this week. I think this is about getting it past the Senate. We have the votes to pass it here in the House. I have not seen one person speak against it. It's basically voter accountability. And it's not something that's a wildly popular idea throughout both the Democrats and the Republicans. For the most part, everybody wants to have legitimate elections. I always point out the fact that John Ossoff just recently had a town hall, a huge town hall. And you know what they did to get into that? You had to show an ID. I rest my case right there. If you have to show an ID to go to a town hall, you should have to show an ID to vote. I mean, that just makes sense. We provide in Georgia free ID. If you have to write a check or pay a bill, own a home, do almost anything, you have to have ID for something. It should be a government-owned, issued ID that can legitimately prove who you are. Most everybody wants to see fair elections, not intimidation, not de-incentivizing people to vote, but legitimate votes. And like I said, if you have to have an ID to go to a town hall, you should have to have a voter ID to vote. It just makes sense. So we will push for this. And I think that the Georgia legislature has done a very good job of reforming our voting system, have better accountability, know how many people voted by the end of the day, getting rid of a lot of the suspicious stuff we had from before. We're not done yet, but that's up to your state legislators on those specific laws. But on the federal level, I think there's some things that we universally agree as a population, and I think the Save America Act will be something we will get passed, but you got to call your senators, and you got two in our state, both Warnock and Ossoff, that are going to go against this, I promise you, because they want to have that conspiracy issue. They want the issue, not the solution, because they want to make sure that there can be loopholes. And in my personal opinion, I think it's nefarious. They don't want to have accountability. And I think that's shame on them. And I think I will let you guys judge on that, but make sure you're ringing their phones and encouraging them to pass it at the Senate level.
Great. Thank you so much for your call tonight, Deborah. Just switching gears, if you're just joining us now, please press 3 to ask a question and press *6 to subscribe to our newsletter. We want to hear from you. So as Washington debates spending, should Congress rein in wasteful spending to help fight inflation? Press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. Again, that's as Washington debates spending, should Congress rein in wasteful spending to help fight inflation? Press 1 for yes, press 2 for no.
Sounds like a trick question to me. No, I don't want to rein in wasteful spending. You know, we're 30% in deficit spending right now. That is unsustainable. We've been that way for a long time. We're burdening our children with a debt they'll never be able to pay if we don't get this under control. That's why I hope that technologies in the future, we just had an AI conference today I was speaking at, we're in a industry that's $5 trillion, which consumes 20% of our GDP, and half of which is paid for by the government, our biggest spending item in government, half of which is paid for by you guys. It's our most expensive thing in most people's lives. If we don't get this under control, I think AI can help with about a quarter of that expense, which means we could save $1 trillion per year. $1 trillion per year on just healthcare. That's the size of the entire economy of South Korea that we waste on healthcare per year. We have a lot of work to do, guys, and I'm all in to try to help with that. And I want you to know that I take that very seriously, and I don't consider that a partisan issue. As a matter of fact, if you look at the bills that we're getting passed, the things I'm trying to do, and I have some very good acts I think that are going to pass this year, it's not about Republican and Democrat. It's about helping us survive into this next century. I think we have some monumental tasks to accomplish, especially when it comes to spending.
Great. And going to our next question from online, it's Carol. Her question is, what is your position on ICE and Border Patrol agents wearing masks and identification?
So this is actually part of what's holding up the DHS portion being passed. For those of you who aren't aware, we had to pass 12 appropriations bill, which has never been done with a single vote majority. We did it. It's the most united you've ever seen the Republican Party in the history of the United States. We passed 12 I did not think we could do it. We did it. We passed all 12 appropriations bills. The Democrats, or should I say the Senate, took issue with the DHS portion because of the controversy on our ICE agents, which I understand why. But the requirements to pass it were kind of crazy, and holding hostage the funding for body cams, which they should be for, additional training, which they should be for, which should actually help us decipher what we're doing wrong and how to do better. Those are the kind of things they're trying to defund right now. I feel like, once again, we're looking at an issue rather than a solution when we talk about this. Are things being done perfectly? Nope, not at all. And never will you have things that are politicized be done perfectly. In fact, I'd make a case that once you make something political, it's much harder to solve. Quite frankly, when we talk about the lives lost, I lament that some mother lost her life. There's multifactorial in that. And I'm not picking sides here. I'm merely stating that a mother lost her life and a nurse lost his life in circumstances which escalated. Nobody came to work that day in the ICE agency that said, I hope that happens. Not one person. Nobody ever hopes for that to happen. It's a nightmarish environment. And from a guy who's been in Afghanistan, in the Persian Gulf, and in Africa during some hard times, I can tell you that Marines don't want to kill people, believe it or not. Now, some people say, yes, they do. Well, realistically, no. That's a very, very bad situation. We want to help people survive, protect the innocent. I consider ourselves modern-day knights. And nobody wants to see that happen. But quite frankly, once you politicize it and create these supercharged environments, bad things sometimes will happen, right or wrong. But we forget in those 2 lives lost that during that same period of time, in 2025 alone, you had 1,500 people were arrested by ICE that had criminal offenses of significance: rape, murder, robberies. 1,500 of these people that we're trying to arrest and deport. And guess who they prey on the most? Those societies that you say, when people are like, oh, I hate ICE, I hate what they're doing, they're pilfering, that same society is being preyed on by those. This is just in Georgia. 1,500 criminals, and I'm talking about not criminal because they crossed the border, that's one issue, but people who are doing nefarious things, violent crimes, and stealing from people that, and a lot of times they're preying off that same society you say you're so vehement about protecting. We have 623 mugshots on the ICE government, ICE.gov, that shows what the criminal illegals recently arrested in Georgia did, whether it be trafficking drugs or rapes or murders or whatever it is. Go to ICE.gov and look up Georgia, and you'll see 623 mug shots and what they were arrested for. And I think you'll be like, wow, that's a lot more victims than 2. Not that 2 is good, but don't forget there's a significant risk and consequence to not deporting violent criminals who came here illegally to do us harm. Venezuela emptied their jails, and a large portion of them came right here. And I had a guy who was driving around in Uber one time, and he was talking about how he came across the border. This is during the Biden administration. He said during his caravan, he was hiding in the bushes at nighttime because these guys, there's a group of 4 guys that were all murderers, comparing who murdered the most people. All came across the border with him. 70% of the females who were coming across the border had been raped repeatedly. Tens of thousands of children came across the border. We don't know where they are. And child trafficking is a massive problem. Let's address the real issues here and not focus on 1 or 2 people that had an unfortunate ending, which I'm not trying to justify one way or another. But if you get in the way of ICE agents, you are literally protecting violent criminals. And I'm not saying they're the only people being deported, but let's focus there first.
Great. Our next question will be from Francis from Flowery Branch.
Say, Brown, real quick, Francis, before you speak, I also want to talk about the demands on the defunding. They literally said they want the ICE agents to have IDs of what their name, their full name, with their face not masked. Why do you think that is? Would you want to be that ICE agent? Would you have a job to do and you know your family now is in jeopardy? Because that's the only reason you'd want that. You know they're ICE agents. They're well identified. They're in groups. They have a badge. It says ICE on them. The only reason you want their full name and their face is to go dox them, to jeopardize and threaten their families. No freaking way. That's not what America wants, and it's not the right thing to do. Sorry. Go ahead.
Francis, you're live with the Congressman.
I love that response, Congressman. My question revolves around the SAVE Act and the bill that was just passed, the funding bill. Why don't we attach the SAVE Act or the Save America Act to those funding bills to force their hand or shut the government down? I am fully for that as well. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. So a lot of us wanted that. This is usually top-down driven. As you are probably aware by now, the president is really good at twisting arms and working with the speaker for what he wants attached to things and when. It is going to come to the floor, either separately as part of reconciliation bill or some other way we're going to try to package it. But the president, that was not his priority right now. He wants to fund the government, get it done. There are several people who believe what you want to believe. But unfortunately, this is where the spectrum of voting comes in. You'll see the far right and the far left voting together on shutting down the government. And most of us don't want to shut down the government because we passed 12 appropriations bills. And sometimes the good is good, but the perfect will never get passed. And I never get what I want. I'm telling you, I roll over sometimes and just get sick to my stomach because of some of the things we pass here, knowing that if I don't pass it, we're going to have to go back to the Senate and they're going to take a worse bill to the floor and we're going to lose. And that's what that's why I passed the big, beautiful bill, because I was actually a holdout. And he said, hey, look, guys, and there was about 20 of us. He said, if you don't pass this bill, you will get something much, much worse and you'll regret it. And you can die on that hill, but it won't be good for America. And I think the president, when he comes at this with his own information and his own opinion, it's not perfect and doesn't mean he's even entirely right, but you're not going to get the president to bend by playing hardball, as you've seen with different people he's taken on individually and in group that come over to the White House and have individual discussions, sometimes pleasant, sometimes not. We ask for things, and it doesn't mean we're only going to get our way, because I agree. I think this is a good hill to die on. I think the president's willing to take this to the end, but he's going to do it his way, and he's leading the party right now, and he's the one twisting arms, and he's the reason, like it or not, he's the reason that he's been able to keep a record number of Republicans in line, given the small majority you have. This is, by percentage, the most unified the Republican Party has ever been in the history of the United States.
Thank you so much, Francis, for your question. We're just going to move over to a quick poll, but before we do that, if you're just joining us, please press *3 to ask a question, and please press *6 to subscribe to our newsletter. Our next poll question is, as healthcare costs continue to rise, should Congress focus on making care more affordable and transparent? Please press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. Again, that's as healthcare costs continue to rise, should Congress focus on making healthcare more affordable and transparent? Press 1 for yes, press 2 for no.
I can't imagine this being a very balanced question again. If you're not understanding that question, I don't know you'll understand my responses on it. I think we all want affordability and transparency.
Yeah. All right, so we'll move over to our next caller. Tanya from Alpharetta, you are live with the Congressman.
Yes, hi. Thanks for taking our questions. My question has two parts. It's about elections. And my first question is, what's your point of view on the recent FBI raid of the 2020 election records in Fulton County? And the second question is, what are your plans to address the president's stated plan to nationalize elections?
Okay, so I'll take on the first one first, was the FBI raid. So I'm not privy to what they had for the judge. It was an appellate court judge that basically is independent, not a partisan, and apparently there was enough evidence to justify that. I don't know what I'm not a lawyer, and I certainly didn't have the inside brief on that, nor have we been briefed on that. But apparently that independent judge said there was enough worrisome evidence that they had the subpoena to go in there and actually get that information. I'm not worried about it. I think the truth will be revealed over time. I think there'll be some opinion, and interpretation of data, just like always. It depends on, your partisan approach to this. I try to keep I was affected by the 2020 election also in Gwinnett, where literally, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I never took anybody to court. I accepted the results, but I was told I won that night. And I was told that there were not enough provisional ballots. I was up by about 2,000 votes, that all the votes were in, and there was no way I could lose and this is by a person who was a nonpartisan lawyer who had done the 6 previous elections before me, said, I've been doing this for a long time. Congratulations, you're our next congressman. They announced it. And then at 2 o'clock in the morning, they found tens of thousands of ballots. They said the machines crashed 7 times. They didn't know how many people had voted. And they closed the polls, which I asked them. I said, what do you mean you found tens of thousands of votes? How many people voted? They couldn't tell me. Now, that's concerning for a guy who puts your entire life savings and career and everything else on the sidelines to achieve something that you think is very important, to not have accountability. So I think it's important that we have the investigation if there's enough evidence that there was foul play. And that's just Gwinnett, by the way, which has never been investigated. If Fulton's getting investigated, it had more evidence than I can just tell you. And like I said, all the focus is always on Fulton, but it wasn't the only county that had some things that were very strange that nobody could explain. And if you have voters that don't have confidence in the system, and you have evidence that says there's a reason for that, you should have the judicial system take a look at it. That should be nonpartisan. And nobody should be scared of the truth. And that includes Epstein, by the way. People trying to make Epstein into a Republican Democrat. People who hate, Bill Clinton are going to say this about Bill Clinton. People who hate Trump are going to say this about Trump. It's not a partisan issue. If you're essentially raping, statutory rape or otherwise, of young women who Epstein was bringing to his island to do bad things, you should be held accountable. I have no apologies for that. I'm all for transparency. That doesn't mean that good people who visit or whatever should be dragged through the mud because they didn't know what was going on there. It's associated with some guy who had a party. I want to avoid that, of course. But if nobody should stand above the law. I don't care if you're the president of the United States. I don't care if you're a billionaire. Most people in America just want to make sure that the laws apply evenly, and that includes for not just Epstein's Island, but for voter integrity. And I think the truth is what's important. You have checks and balances in when you sign for any evidence. There is a chain of custody that's very strict. And I don't think the FBI is going to sit there and do things that are going to be jaded to an administration. They're the FBI. There's lots of people who are going to put their eyes on that. It's not going to be one person. You're not going to cover up things and have a conspiracy side. Well, people always have conspiracy theories. But I think getting to the bottom of this is really important, that people have restored confidence in a system that's very much called into question right now. And notice I didn't say that anything was done wrong. Either side. I want the truth.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Our next caller is Christy. Christy, you are live with the Congressman.
Hi, Congressman. I am Christy. I work for Georgia Highlands Medical Services, a nonprofit, FQHC in Cumming. And we've all recently heard of all the fraud going on in healthcare and billing practices. And my question is, especially for the nonprofits who struggle with their budgets, how are you going to make sure that the money gets appropriated to the right people doing the good work, as opposed to the rampant fraud that we keep hearing about every night on the news?
Christine, that's a great question. And that's, in a $5 trillion industry, how do you worry as a nonprofit that's doing great things at a price point that's dramatically lower than average for profiting hospitals and physicians? How do you not get funded when you're doing the right thing? I couldn't agree with you more. The problem is because so many people have pilfered the system of hundreds of billions of dollars by accepting false claims for basically accounts that don't even exist, or overcharging for services that weren't even delivered. And then we get to the end of the year, we're out of money. And good people who are delivering great results don't have the money and it's getting clawed back. That's a criminal offense to the American people. That's exactly why we want to clean up this. That's why AI could be such a valuable tool to actually track down that waste, fraud, and abuse. The more money we save, the more money we'll have available, not only to put back in towards debt and deficit spending, but actually towards serving the American people, which deserve it. We've paid an enormous amount. 20% of our entire GDP goes towards healthcare. No other country does that. Nobody's even close. And we have more technology and ability and resources than any other nation in the world, but we're not seeing the results. Why are we paying so much to get the same or worse results of other countries? Now, we do treat heart attacks and strokes better than anybody else in the world, but just general service and proactive care, it's a travesty and it's criminal, and that's one of the things we need to correct so that we can fund great NGOs. I assume you're one of those and that you're doing great things, and I appreciate you guys essentially doing this out of the goodness of your heart, because I know it's not for all the money, that's for sure.
Thank you so much for participating in tonight's call. Our next caller will be Thomas from Dahlonega.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, you are live.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for the time, Congressman. I had a quick question. I think it was May of last year, you were part of a letter sent to Marco Rubio urging just for on H-1B visas, you wanted to allow in-country renewals. You mentioned that this would keep America competitive. And then I know also, I think it was in 2023, you had introduced a bill to eliminate the country caps on these H-1B and other type visas, which would allow, actually an article about this said the overwhelming majority of the employment-based green cards would go to nationals of the country of China and India. I just wanted to know why you particularly thought that would keep us more competitive, especially since something you introduced would allow more people from a country that we probably would consider our number one competitor into our private space or our white-collar jobs, especially at a time when a lot of white-collar jobs are disappearing for the American middle class. I know, I think it was last week, Home Depot here in the Atlanta area, actually my friend who works there, he thankfully didn't get laid off, but they laid off 800 employees. So I just wondered how that makes us more competitive, especially when China, who is our main competitor, and I guess you could say Russia too, aren't importing people from other countries, especially while I think I read that Gen Z college graduates are actually unemployed at the same rate as Gen Z non-college graduates. Thanks.
Okay, great question, and I'm happy to answer. I'm glad. This is actually one of my favorite topics. So H-1B visa has been vilified and misconstrued multiple times, including my bill. My bill doesn't increase H-1B visas by one, not even one. It doesn't change the overall number. If you wanted to really revamp it, I've said that you should do it by industry per year. So in other words, for example, if in a given year you have, like right now, we're shrinking the need for IT specialists because AI is replacing a lot of jobs. That means a contraction of that market where you actually would deport people who have been brought in recently. You'd go in reverse order when you've been got in because you always fill it with Americans first. If you want to right size the economy every year, it'll depend on, it could be hotel industry, construction industry, ag, healthcare, you name it. I mean, it's endless. H-1Bs are misconstrued. It's not just tech jobs, it's healthcare jobs, it's other jobs. You have, I can't tell you how many, it's not just H-1B, there's so many different immigration systems. Some of them have limitations, some of them don't have limitations, but our entire immigration system needs to be right-sized to our economy per year. In other words, some years you're going to have an influx needed agriculture, some years you're going to have a freeze, you don't have the ability to sustain it, they'll have to go. Same thing with hotel industry, same thing with any industry. It should be right-sized for what you don't have produced in America. But we're going to have a shrinking population in America now. That means that even with AI replacement of jobs, and you can see it right now in the AI sector right now, we have one of my my longest tenured employee, her daughter just graduated from University of North Georgia with a very technical degree, can't find a job, like you were saying. If that's the case, then we shouldn't be importing anybody until those kind of people are employed. Zero people. But that's not what we're facing down right now. My bill addressed the current law so that if, for example, it's not going to change any number, the overall number is still going to remain the same. And that's an arbitrary number. But the percentages, what I said, it's not fair for a small country like named Lithuania, has 7% cap on it, and India has 7% cap on it. That doesn't make sense. There's 1.47 billion people in India, and maybe $1 million people in another country. It doesn't make sense to have exactly the same no matter what country you're from. It basically makes it fair based on merit and the time you put it in. In other words, if you just put it in tomorrow and you're from a country that's small, you'd have an advantage over somebody who put it in 20 years ago from a country that's big. And maybe where your resume is far more impressive. It's just to equalize, once again, the fairness and the approach to it, not to mess with the numbers overall. So I know it was misconstrued by a lot of people. Some people did it on purpose. Some people did it because they just didn't understand or read the bill in detail. But it was never to change the overall number. It was to appreciate a precedent of talent and order rather than to go strictly by what country. And it actually had limitations on China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, as identifying them, and it can be identified as different countries each year. Those are the four that come to mind right now, that limits their access to our markets, especially in sensitive information. So I'm very concerned with the future of technical jobs. That was addressed in this, but it was not the overall number. I would love to address that separately because, once again, I think that needs to be addressed per industry, per year, and that means sometimes you have to contract. You may have to deport people and then put them first in line to come back because they follow the law, by the way. Instead of doing a lottery system every time, if you follow the law and go back to your country, you should be able to come back because that business wants you and because you add a value when it's needed. But I want to reward people who follow the law, not people who break the law. Great question.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for your question. Let's move on to our next question, which is an online question from Rick. His question is, what is federal government doing to make sure that AI is safe?
Just had a conference on this today. This is a nonpartisan issue to me. AI is here to stay. Some of the things that could put us way behind in the competition, actually make it more unsafe for us if China were to dominate or any other country, is if we put limitations between states. Interstate commerce is already covered in the Interstate Commerce Clause. International trade is similar to that. If you have 50 different regulations in 50 different states, why would you be in a state that makes you non-competitive? It will hamstring us. That's exactly what Europe did, and that's why they'll never be competitive with us in AI. China doesn't have that disadvantage. They have 40% of all AI programmers live in China. They have 50% of all the recent AI patents. This is a real chase, but we do have a significant advantage in chip production, especially in the leading chip production. I think AI is really important that we safeguard not only the highly powered upper end chips, that we don't export those to countries that are competitive with us, but we control the volume too. There's a happy medium. You don't want to cut them off entirely, or otherwise they'll do things that will replace us in the market, and then we'll lose our market share and the industry standard. You always want to be the industry standard. You always want to be the VHS, not the beta. You want to make sure that we're compatible with, and that everybody's trying to match us rather than replace us with something else. We do lead, but that leadership in AI is precarious. We need to protect the two things we talked about at conference day in a forum, was that you protect the truth. In other words, if I go online, it doesn't give me bad information out. There's a lot of bad information out there already. I don't think most of it's nefarious. I just think it's a poorly structured tool. I'm like, that's not right. Give me a better answer. And then it'll actually go back and research deeper and realize, oh, I made a mistake. That's a shame because people usually put the first thing down as fact. I'll give you an example of something recently that I was in a hearing on where I was asking the experts who were talking about global warming and global catastrophe and polar ice caps melting and the rising of sea levels and bases being put underwater. And as I started to quiz them, I realized they had no idea, no foundational basis on their opinions. And I start quoting them stuff that I got off the internet very easily in 5 minutes. But what I didn't realize later is about a month later when I went back to go re-reference those things, the internet hid it from me. I don't know if it's because of my hearing or some other reason, some nefarious. It was hard to find the truth. They had been buried on purpose because people were playing games with AI and with the program, the access to information. We cannot have an open, transparent discussion on science, on our spending, which is it's $1 trillion spending item. This whole global weather catastrophe that they keep on predicting. You can put $1 trillion in the wrong hands, and it can be used against us and ruin our economy for no good benefit of the environment because we're not using facts. I want to make sure the truth is the truth, that it's still science. I also want to make sure that we don't do deep fakes, that people are misrepresenting what they believe in. I also want to make sure that children are not abused through the AI system, that you don't have people making pornographic victims out of multiple children, women, anybody. I just think that's a horrible thing that we need to protect everyone against. But the truth, we got to put some guardrails on there to make sure that we have access to it, but that it's safe for everyone. And that's a tough, tricky question to do when it comes to freedom versus opportunities.
Great. Thank you so much. Our next question will be from Narendra from Johns Creek. You are live with the Congressman.
Thank you, Congressman, for taking my question. This is Narendra from Johns Creek. There is a lot of uncertainty in the economy and the direction it is going on. What is your opinion? How optimistic you are about the direction of the economy that's going to be in 2026? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So the question was about the economy, how optimistic am I? I'm actually very optimistic about the economy. All indicators that we're having some of the most robust growth in our economy we've had in the last 20 years. It looks very good, and there's more investments to be had from international investments, production. That's good, and it looks like our inflation has actually stabilized around 2%, a little over 2%, which is good. That means the expansion of our GDP and our income levels are outpacing the inflationary costs, which is a good thing. There's a lot of things we could debate. There's a lot of things that are more controversial, but I think the economy is going to be strong. We need to watch our debt, though, because if we don't and our currency is affected, it won't matter. Because if our currency crumbles, it creates an inflationary cost to Americans anyways. We'll lose our purchasing value. It'll cost us money in the long run. That's why controlling the deficit spending is essential to protecting the economy, not just the expansion of jobs and income, not just the control of inflation, but the control of debt. So important. I have a bill called the Incentivized Savings Act. I'm really proud of that. For those of you who aren't aware of it, I think it's going to pass. It just went through markup and oversight. It passed in flying colors. I'm excited about it. It's a nonpartisan bill, and it's basically at the end of the fiscal year, if you don't spend it right now, you lose it. And somebody else spends it anyways. That's a horrible way to do any kind of business, and government's no different. That means all the money we appropriate gets spent no matter what, even if it's spent on bad things. I was a military guy. 30 years ago, I thought this was a bad idea. I still think it's a bad idea. Instead, my bill allows you, if you're at the end of the fiscal year and you don't spend it because you're like, I don't need to. I reserve 10% of my funds for emergency spending. I didn't need it, so now I'm not forced to spend that money. I could actually say, I'm not going to spend that, and 49% of that would roll forward to next year. So I have actually more money to work with. 49% goes back to debt and deficit, which we have a massive problem with, and 2% goes to the department to award those people for being good stewards of the people's money. That way it has 3 incentives to do the right thing, which is save money, rather than 2 incentives to do the wrong thing, which is spend all your money or else I'm going to punish you and we're going to still spend it anyways. We got to look outside the box to the future. But I think as far as the economy goes, I think we're going to be fine. I think we have a really strong economy unless something unforeseeable comes up in the near future. These should be some good years.
Great. Thank you so much. And that was our last question of the evening. And thank you so much for joining us. And Congressman, any last words?
Yeah. So first of all, if you want to get our newsletter, basically it's a weekly letter. It kind of informs you what we're doing up here, what kind of issues are. Press *6 and we'll get you signed on. We'd love to keep on informing you. You're always welcome to call my office and make inquiries. There's some controversial things that happen up here, but I think you'll find I'm a fairly reasonable guy who wants what's best for you guys. Paying attention. I understand that some things are partisan. Most things that are partisan are not good for the people. most things that we divide our country over. When you look at the country to solve your problems, realize the government is seldom the answer to your problems. Matter of fact, the more the government's got involved in education, the bigger the problems. Same thing with healthcare. With most things, the biggest problem we have is the government. It is the problem. But people keep on turning back to the government to solve the very problems that it created to begin with. I will do my very best to empower you to make sure that we have representative government pushed down to the local level as much as possible, as that's where the most of the spending is done. It used to be 2/3 of all spending was done at the local level, 1/3 at the federal level. Now it's been flip-flopped. That is the least representative government you'll ever have, and the most expensive and the most wasteful, quite frankly. We're going to do whatever we can to fix that, to empower you to work, to be happy. The money you get from government will never make you happy. Having a job, having value, having worth, having a future, something, upward mobility, that is happiness, my friends. That's been proven time and time again. That's what's made America great. And I appreciate you guys participating with me tonight. God bless you, and Semper Fidelis.